I'm Christina. Thermomix, cleaners coming in and out, but it's juggling it in.
And I'm Ani. But then you should never say, I know, and then not bother to actually learn.
Yeah, and we're two best friends.
Yes, moms trying to juggle businesses, family, and friendship.
Without losing our minds.
Yeah.
So grab a coffee.
Or something stronger.
And join us at the table. So, do you want to say how we met and how we decided to...
Yeah, so we met actually through our sons.
Yes.
Because they were introduced first. We were busy working.
Exactly.
As always. And they, I think it was 6 months into their friendship, during one of their birthdays, is how we got introduced and coincidentally moved into the same neighborhood.
Same building.
Yeah,
the same building.
Same time.
Yeah, just before COVID.
Yes.
And then lockdown happened and we ended up staying together, being locked in the same building, so bonding over that and finding ways to entertain our children and just surviving it all.
I think surviving is we essentially survived COVID. And I was coincidentally here a couple of weeks before lockdown happened, sitting at this table with a group of friends, and lockdown took place and the entire world changed. We went from, every day going into the office, you coming into the restaurants, to complete isolation with two small children.
Exactly.
And you were pregnant, no?
I was pregnant with my second one.
Yeah.
So yes, I wouldn't have done it without you.
Yeah, same. And I would not have survived it without you.
And I think that's why it's very important to get together as women and talk about what we're going through, talk about our everyday struggles between work, children, marriage, middle life,
yes,
crisis or not.
Yeah. Exactly.
And discuss it all.
And actually, when this first happened, I was still working in the corporate world. I wasn't an entrepreneur, but at that point, you'd already been an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so we come from very different
yes.
backgrounds, because I was always an entrepreneur, and you are
I was
from
always
a more
in the corporate side. Always.
But we really complement each other.
Yes.
Despite the fact that we come from two very different workspaces and lifestyle, because for example, I get to work some crazy hours at the restaurants, staying very long, mingle with very different people than you guys do, and
it's just a more it's a different type of chaos in each environment. I
exactly
think, that you have to deal with. I would say probably out of all the things that you went through up until the point you had children and dealt with COVID, that was probably the most jarring experience.
Yes.
Because it was probably the most unexpected. And everything that we were taught leading up to that, including those classes that you take of parenthood, etc., had nothing to do with the reality.
It's all theoretical.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, it doesn't even touch on the reality of what is difficult in that transition, especially as a working parent.
And I think the world has changed dramatically since COVID, and I think with everything that's happening,
I feel the same way. Don't worry.
I often I have a very, touch wood, so far I've had a very successful career. It hasn't been a smooth ride, but I keep going, I keep fighting. I love what I do. I love working with all its challenges, and I love being a mother, and I love being a woman. But I find it really hard sometimes to juggle everything together. I find it hard to keep up with what's happening at my children's school. I find it hard to keep up with home stuff on top of my work and my personal relationships. And I feel that a lot of women are going through the same thing. Yes. And we, as millennials, as millennial women, we were convinced that we had to have it all, and we could have it all. We could be the successful career woman, phenomenal mother, great wife, sexy kitten, everything in one go. And it's just not working out anymore. And I think that it's just starting to crumble. And there's a lot of articles that are coming out recently about all these
shifts
in society and in women. And I think it's very important to talk about it and discuss our experiences and empower other women and connect.
Yes, and also find solutions.
Yes, find solutions.
Find solutions and share solutions of what to do in these instances. So before I had kids, I was convinced that when I got married and had kids, I would want to stop working. When I had my son, my first week of having him, my thought was, I want to work, but I have to figure out what I really want to do so it's worth it.
Yes.
And so the assumptions that you make before you go through that transition aren't necessarily the reality when you go through it. And you can't dictate. There was no way you could have convinced me otherwise that I would have wanted to work and keep a career and, not only keep it, but grow it significantly. But when that shift happened, that was my first thought, is not only do I want to keep working, but I want to make sure that what I'm doing is worthwhile.
Because that's for your sanity.
Exactly.
First of all.
But not only that, but you also start to, you see someone, and as they grow, they become more mirrors than they are when they're babies. And when they're babies, I wasn't very good at the baby stage. I'm much better now when they engage with you and they give you feedback. And one of the reasons is because they're some of the only people in my life that can look at me and tell me something honestly are my kids.
Yes.
With no filter.
So true.
Brutal truth.
Yes.
And if you're going to do it, you realize very quickly that there's someone watching you at all times.
Yes.
And so if you're going to make that transition and continue it and keep it going, it really has to be worth doing. And it also sets an example for the little ones that are watching
Exactly, because
you.
they reflect your behavior. So if you're stressed, they're stressed. If you're swearing,
they're swearing.
Yes. And it has happened to all of us. You know, at some point you had some very bad days and you behave badly. Sometimes you can always keep it together as a mother. And then you see the effects this has on your children and how they mirror you. And you say, oh my God, I can't do this. And then what am I doing?
They keep you in check.
They keep you in check.
Yes,
exactly.
they keep you in check.
And it's very important.
Yeah. I would say, though, the most shocking thing to me in that transition was not all the things that I was set up to expect. Like childbirth, labor, how to figure out how to change your diaper, all that stuff was nonsensical in comparison to what I found difficult, which was all the intense mental load that you all of the sudden fully own, that you can't even explain to other mothers in that instance. And I think this is where you and I, when we met, because of COVID, because the fact that we were essentially trapped in an environment that we couldn't really get out of at that time, we started to really talk about what that really felt like and what that was really like, and try to help each other get out of that experience in a positive way.
Yes.
And thankfully we did, but it was really difficult.
It was really
difficult.
And I found it even more difficult as my children became toddlers and started going to school. What I found the hardest was how to keep up with their schedules and my schedule, and going back to work. And work was demanding because the world doesn't stop because you had a child. You have to keep going, you have to keep evolving, you have to keep being competitive. You have to keep moving forward, and at the same time your children are moving forward, and you have to keep up with their activities, with the social schedules, with the school WhatsApp groups, and at the same time you have to keep your relationship, if you have a relationship, going. And I guess if you're single, you have to have a personal life for yourself, because otherwise you're just going to go crazy. Yes. And what has happened to a lot of us, I think, is that we lose our identity and ourselves in the midst of it all. And then you wake up one day and you say, who am I? What am I? What's happening? And that's where the middle life crisis happens. Yes. And
if you haven't forgotten who you are, you start to resent what's taken you away from who you were.
Exactly.
And I think and then either you continue building that resentment, which isn't going to go anywhere positive, or you start to take more control of what you do. Yes. And I think if you do the second, you're doing it because you have your own, mental kind of discipline and rigor to do that, or because you have people around you that can pull you out of it and keep you in check, like we're saying the kids do, and really be honest with you. Because I think that there's a combination of having the support and safety from saying, okay, you know what, it's okay if you're having a bad day, but when you're doing this too long, also having a friend that says, all right, time
That's
to
the
pull
most
together.
important thing.
Yeah, and you did that. You did that for me. You did that
for me. And it's good to know that, you're not the only one that's struggling. You're not the only one that's failing. You're not the only one that's the worst mother in the world in your head.
In your head, not in the reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Not in
the reality, but
in your head.
It's so important to have that support system, and it's so important to make time for your friends, and even a little coffee, and a walk in the park, or a joint Pilates class like we used to do. And it was so much fun because we pushed each other to lose the baby weight. And it was not just about the exercise. We were just talking and venting. And even the instructor would say, just stop talking and exercise.
Yes.
And I think
maybe that's why it took me a little longer than it should have.
And I think it's so important because that's why we're here for, and we must not forget that.
Yeah. So what do you think from 7 years ago, or six years ago till today, what do you think you've gotten better at doing as a working mom?
Well, I'm more organized. I'm better at juggling 500 things at the same time. I remember the first year that both my children were at school and nursery. I was really struggling. I was chaotic. I couldn't keep up. I was panic. Now it's all sorted, organized. I can multitask, and that's actually even helping me with work, because tasks that I couldn't take a few years ago, now I can do so many things at the same time because I'm just so used to it. Cooking while I'm doing homework, while I'm on the phone giving instructions at work to somebody else, and it's just happening all the time. And sometimes I have some younger friends who are not married or don't have families yet, and they tell me, "Oh my God, how can you do so many things at the same time? How can you?" And I say, I have no choice. It's either I swim or I sink. And if I want to do everything, because I don't want to say, I want to do it all as well. I want to party sometimes, but then the next day, I know that I still have to get up at 7 a.m. and drive my kids to school and, get on with my life. I just have to own it.
Yes.
And I think that's what I've become better at, just owning it.
Yeah.
And making conscious choices that if, let's say, as I said, whatever I do, I know there's going to be a consequence, but I'm just owning it, and I'm keep going with it.
Yeah, I would say mine's almost not necessarily better at juggling, but better at letting things go that I would have never let go before. Never. It would have been, that in my head would have been failure to say, I didn't get that done.
Yes.
Now,
yes, I agree.
the prioritization is different.
Yes.
And I'm looking at what either in my work makes the most impact and doing that first rather than avoiding it.
Yes.
And assuming that I have an entire day. I've gotten better at using up 3 minutes of spare time.
Yes.
Magically.
Everything counts.
Yeah. And somebody said to me when I was pregnant that when you have a baby, as a woman, you become more efficient. And I was like, oh, that's not possible. But that's why. Yes. I think because those times that you used to take for granted, you fill them. The problem is that because you fill them, you have absolutely no downtime. So when, everything is falling apart and somebody's like, oh, you should take care of yourself. It's laughable sometimes because when or how?
But
how do you squeeze that in?
You said something that's very right. You do actually become more efficient. Naturally, you become more efficient from all these experiences. And I think that's also part of the reason that a lot of reports are coming back and saying that now the most successful entrepreneurs, the most successful people in the workforce are women between the age of 45 and 54. And I think it's because naturally the way society has forced us to do all these things at the same time. You become so efficient that you overtake everybody else at work. And I think right now women are unstoppable.
Yeah. I also think that you know, when you're younger and you're starting out, you go through these phases.
Yeah.
You start your life with somebody telling you what to do all the time, and you just do it. Then you get into, you know, school years where there's the more rebellious side of you.
Yeah.
Then you get into your 20s when you're discovering what you like, what you don't like, discovering the world. Then you go into your 30s and you're a little bit more settled. And I think once you reach your 40s, you don't care as much or at all about what anybody else is telling you in terms of how you should behave, what you should look like, how you should think, what success means, what failure means, all that stuff, because you've defined it all for yourself at that point. And even if you haven't, you're much more comfortable with the lack of a definition than you were when you were 20.
Absolutely.
Or when you were in your, you know, teens. And so I think that permission to just be and do and not worry about, well, what is the impact of what I'm doing on somebody else? Whether it's how you run your business or what you say, what you wear, who you're with, all that type of stuff. None of it really matters or has as much weight as it did when you were figuring out who you were. And so I think that's why you see that shift.
Yes.
Because that, you know.
But why do you think is happening more now and not more than 10 years ago? Why do you think women are taking, because it's a fact, you see that it's going there. The women are really moving forward, taking over everything, moving ahead of men right now. And that's why a lot of men are struggling. And there's all these reports coming out. Men are struggling in society right now because they're losing their sense of purpose.
Yes.
Because we can do it all.
That's
and that's
scary
what
as
happens.
a parent of boys.
Of boys, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So we both have that.
Yes.
But I think the reason to your question of why is it happening now versus before, two things. As bad as social media and the internet can be, the one thing that it has done is it's kind of spread information, not only the bad information, of which there is a lot, but also spread information about behaviors, research, all this stuff that wasn't
what's
readily
acceptable, not acceptable, what you should take.
Yes, and for better or for worse, there's obviously both two sides. But I think the better part is that not all of this research was so readily accessible.
Yeah.
So if you weren't, you know, signing up to a magazine or a newspaper or going to the library and reading and self-propelling your education, you weren't getting it.
Plus,
and so
it
that
was not
very
acceptable. There's a lot of things that were not acceptable, or society was telling us, you should do this, you shouldn't speak when you're not spoken. Yeah. You have a place in society.
Yeah, but I still think those things exist to some degree, not as bad as that. Yeah. But they've definitely changed, but they still exist to some degree. Mm-hmm. The difference is that now you've seen the other side.
Yes.
And because you've seen the other side, you're like, wait, I'm not the only person who's struggling with this. So you then start to propel not only yourself, but also friends in a certain type of behavior because you're being told, oh, there's another vision
of that.
And I can actually have a career. I can be a mother and I can be successful at both, maybe not at the same time, all the time. That's not possible.
But I can do it.
But not only can I do it, and I can also be more open about what isn't working. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the point, and COVID exacerbated this because I think people got to a point where they were really fed up, really feeling trapped, really feeling locked in. I mean, some people were flying. I remember my husband and I were at home working nonstop, and we would talk about this in our bubble. But we were working nonstop, and we would always be seeing people traveling all over the world. You know, those solo travelers, and thinking, what do they do for work? How can they just get up and go like this? And while you're, you know, all of a sudden you're sharing not only your family life, at least you and your husband are used to working together. We weren't at all. And so for us, overnight, I remember the first day of lockdown, we started the morning with, you know, finding out that, okay, it's basically us, a 1-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And the morning was like, guys, we're going to do this. We had music on for breakfast. We were cooking. They were happy. By 3 p.m., we were getting a divorce, you know?
like I know. It's so,
And he said to me, he said, there's going to be two things that come out of this. One is a lot of divorces, one is a lot of
and
babies.
that's what happened.
And that's exactly what happened. But it was too much at some point, because you don't know, there's a lot of unknowns, which has each of you individually feeling fear. There are tiny people in front of you that you have to try and protect, but you're not really sure, what are you protecting them from? How do you even protect them? Are you equipped to protect them? You don't know any of those things yet. There's too many unknowns. On top of it, your work goes from already busy to exponentially more difficult and busy. And and then for people who had school-age children, schools shut down. For people who were
so
single, they were
hard.
isolated, and all of these problems. You had your parents in another country and you were trying to figure out how to help them.
Yes.
When you weren't living next to them. So all of these things, and you didn't have the time to share it with everyone.
Yeah.
Or the people closest to you, even with your spouse.
Yes.
Because I remember we would see you guys, and when we were seeing you, you were simultaneously having dinner with us and working. I remember that.
Yeah.
And I remember you were both like brainstorming about, okay, what do we do now?
How to survive.
This has happened, this has happened. And it was just a 24/7 thing. So even if you were living together, we would always say, we're passing each other on the way to the kitchen to get another coffee.
Yeah.
But not necessarily talking. We were just there, physically there. And then you had little kids tugging on you saying, Mama, what are you doing? Can you play with me? And you're like, no, I can't play with you. And so that's when the guilt, never in my life until that point had I felt guilt and I've done plenty of things I should feel guilty about potentially, but until that point, I really started to feel, okay, now my child is kind of that face that he just gave me for me to, responding with, I can't play with you, because it felt like make or break. So you mean
that's when your mom guilt kicked in?
My mom guilt was exponential. And now what I appreciate more is that I can, even when those moments happen, and they still do happen, even though they're older, I can say to him, okay, I can play with you, but this is when I can play with you. Or I can do that now, and then I have to work later.
So you figured it more out.
I think the fact that I can speak to him and he responds to me, and he A, understands, and B, gives me permission, and we come up with a plan together. Yeah. So that I can do both, but not at the same time. That is what has changed, rather than me not being able to explain to a 2.5-year-old that I can't play right now, and he's thinking, of course you can, you're my mother, and I'm the most important thing, because that's how he feels, and rightly so, he should. And that's why I think the difficulty of motherhood was not having children or the children themselves. It was all the mental things that the weight that you start to carry.
That you have. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then there's a lot of the mundane. This is another thing that was kind of a shock to me. The mundane mental load. The kind of sitting there, being on schedules, trying to figure out now that they're school age, what they need, when they need it, becoming a student with them when you never signed up for that. Yes. I have two, I don't know.
You have to sit with them during homework.
Exactly.
You have to, but as you said, the mental load is huge, because you have to think, they need, from every little detail, I need to buy fruit for the house, to they need new clothes, to we have a bake sale at school tomorrow, and I've been there, I forgot to bring the cupcakes, and I was mom shamed by another mom. We'll talk about it in another episode. And then, it's this load is exactly what you said.
Yes. I think actually that maybe we should talk about the mom shaming now.
Yeah.
Yes. No, but I think that there's, with the mental load, the part that, I don't know which part kind of got to you the most, but to me it was the mundane stuff, especially when they were babies and they weren't giving you any kind of feedback, and they were cute and cuddly, sleeping most of the time, but there was I felt the most isolated with that load then, because there was a lot of, a lot of other parents kind of telling you, but didn't you know? Haven't you read? Didn't you go to that class? Why aren't you a part of this? Oh, that's the wrong class. This is the right class. Yeah. All that type of stuff. And I remember thinking, I was sitting in a cafe with a group of moms. It's never the dads. It's always the moms.
Yeah, always.
And not necessarily because the dads don't want to be there, by the way. It's not even that. In some cases, yes.
Yeah, we have no choice.
But somehow Yeah, we
But
have no
that's
choice.
another thing is that naturally, why do you always add the mom to the WhatsApp group and not naturally the dad?
Yes.
That
I always
you
get the
have
school calls
some
first.
dads that are a plus that they want to be involved, but the natural call
Yes.
is always the mother because that's how it is.
Yeah.
And so this is the load we're talking about, that society naturally, and of course, it's motherhood, but why do we have to have all this load on us? Why do you have to think what everybody is going to eat tonight? Why does, even some people have help, some people don't have help, but even I hear very often, even from the people that have help at home, and let's say a nanny, the nanny will never text the daddy, "Hi daddy, what's for dinner tonight?" They will text the mommy and say, "Hi mom, what's for dinner tonight?" So even if you have help, you still have to manage it. You still have to have that stress of telling them what to do and what to cook and have everything prepared and make sure everything is in the house. Nobody ever texts the dad. Everybody always texts the mom.
But I think, okay, as a mom of boys, I think that's part of like just learned behavior that is just generational.
Yeah, it's generational, but the
yeah.
thing is that a lot of fundamental things have not changed.
But then
But
how do we
have
change
added.
them?
So
how do we change that?
Exactly.
How do you change that?
I think that's what's happening right now, and I think women, are having enough, and it's time for a change. And
so what do you do?
we're gonna
What do you
figure
do
out
with your
here.
son? What do you do with your son to?
What do I do?
What do you think about, like, for example, what
I
that
try,
behavior
and
would look like?
that's a big responsibility as mothers, raising sons. And that's one of my biggest worries as well, because I think that because I have a son and I have a daughter, and from a very, very young age, you can see the difference on how they deal with stuff, or how they multitask, and it's also kind of it's in our genes in a way. Some things are in our genes, and I think one of my biggest stresses right now is how am I going to raise my son, how I'm raising my son to fit in the modern society, because this is all going to accelerate. And by the time our sons are out there forming relationships, being in a society, what is that society going to be?
But what do you do to prepare them? What do you do to prepare them? So for me, I think there is like the fundamental, like, you being the female in the family and having your male partner in the family. There's things that change and things that don't change. And obviously there's all sorts of blends of families that have different combinations.
Yes, of course.
And so you decide that in your family how that exists. But then I think that whatever, especially like the relationship that you have with your partner and how you impart that relationship and partnership onto your kids is something that they learn from and they watch. So in my growing up, for me, my father was an entrepreneur. And when we moved to the US, and when we moved to the US, because he was an entrepreneur, he was at home a lot more than my mother was, because she was working. But he worked equally as much. He just had more flexibility in his work, and actually a lot of his work was over the weekend rather than during the week. And it consisted of a lot of travel here and there, And so I saw that. I saw that relationship take place where it was not abnormal for him to be at home.
Yeah.
And not abnormal for him to make meals for us. But there was still a very different relationship with my mother when she was doing it. So I remember over the holidays, for example, that's something that, I really looked forward to, and it really gave me comfort. And to this day, when I have those same meals that she made then, I have a different reaction to them because they were from her. And I think that what's hard partly is there's a difficult job in keeping your femininity and accelerating your strength as a woman who has a career and is an entrepreneur, or is either working inside of a business or
and it's very hard for men as well.
Yes.
Because they are losing a little bit. As I said, it's very hard for men and for boys because men are naturally, it's in their genes to be maybe leaders or hunters or I lost my.
It's okay. Yeah, just say it again. It's difficult for men, you were saying.
Yes, I think it's very difficult for men. And what I want to teach and protect my son is how to find purpose and to be a man in this society, whatever that's going to be. Because what is happening right now, a lot of women are saying, okay, I bring the same money to the table. Mm-hmm. I can support this family entirely by myself. But at the same time, I'm raising the kids. Mm-hmm. I'm dealing with the household. So what do you bring to the table? Mm-hmm. Nothing. That's what a lot of women are saying right now. Yeah. And I think that's causing a lot of... it's causing a crisis in manhood as well. And it's not helping marriages, and it's not helping society. And I think as a mother raising a son is the biggest challenge. And I haven't figured it out yet because it keeps changing.
Yeah, there's a couple of good books that are actually out on this now, but I haven't found anything that is out about the dual relationship, between the two. But there are a couple of good books that have just started to come out about the impact on boys and the impact on their future, which I've been reading because I want to be cognizant of the fact that just because we have the strength to propel our careers doesn't mean that they all of a sudden should lose that.
Exactly.
Because the whole thing that we're fighting for in equality and partnership is equality and partnership. It's not to say I am better than you or you're better than me or I can do this and you can't. And I think that at some point that's how it turned.
Yeah.
And now there's this push and pull of taking that power back if you're in the manosphere, for example, and putting down any strong female character. And then there's, on the other side, also women pushing to say, no, it is ours and that's it. But that imbalance is not going to help anyone.
No.
So it's about trying to figure out, what does it mean to be in a true partnership? What does it mean to still be feminine and have all those things that you grew up thinking were feminine? Yeah. Because I don't know about you, but I certainly struggle with that balance the most. Finding my femininity over and over again and creating room for that. And this is where I reach out to friends, and all of my friends are very, very kind of heavily feminine, I would say, in terms of what they protect. So I learned from that how to protect my own boundaries so that I can not lose that or not give that up for the sake of driving a career forward. I'm beyond proving. I don't care about proving anymore. I think I left that behind in my late 20s. I left that when my mom died. I left that completely. I didn't care about proving anything to anyone anymore, and something just completely shifted in me that made me not care. Yeah. About voices that don't matter. Yeah. The people, I think it's Brené Brown talks about the critics in the cheap seats, who have a lot of opinions, but they're not even, they're not even playing in the same place. So what value do they have to offer? So once you shut that off and you focus on the opinions of, first, yourself, secondly, of people around you who you respect and value, then it's an entirely different thing. But then you finding that balance with your partner.
So it's very funny because we're trying to shoot here in between kitchen preparations, Thermomix, cleaners coming in and out, but it's juggling it in, trying to squeeze in a filming in between the restaurant operating hours, because that's the best place we could find. We're still at the beginning, but it's all part of what we're talking about.
Yes.
Kind of. Yeah. The craziness. Yeah. So.
No, but the book that I was telling you about it's called Notes on Being a Man.
Okay.
And it's by this, I would say he's been somewhat controversial, but not always,
Is he a very macho
well,
guy,
he talks about,
is he trying to...
He talks about, what it means to become, what, you would deal with as a boy growing in society, then when he grew up versus today, and what he thinks some of those push and pull things are that make it really difficult and confusing for men to have what they need. So I'm reading it because I have two boys and I'm trying to understand more about the impact on what's happening on them and their future, and make sure that they aren't lost and they do find a firm footing. And it doesn't mean that if their footing is firm, that their partner has to be weaker for them to think that it's firm. And so I think part of it is showcasing that in your environment. And that's why I say they're like your little mirrors, because every time anything happens that no adult has the guts to tell you the truth about, they look at you and very directly say, Mom, this is the situation.
Whatever that is. Yeah.
Yes. And
even
they call
on
you
the
out
way
on
I
that
look
behavior.
sometimes.
Yes.
Especially my daughter will come and say, Mom, I don't like your hair today.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Thank you very much.
I get, why is your hair always up?
Yeah. Do your nails, Mommy. Yeah, exactly.
Why is your hair always up?
Exactly.
Why are you always wearing the same earrings?
Mommy, please put your hair down. We don't like it when your hair is up with a hair clip like this. Yes. But that's the mom look in the house.
Yes.
Hair up all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or if you're not exercising or taking care of yourself or sitting down to eat or finishing your coffee before it's freezing cold and has become iced coffee.
Because they look up to you.
Yes.
And I find that children, actually I used to be the same when I was a child, now that I think about it. When my mother was not wearing makeup or when she was around then, I was kind of embarrassed. If she picks me up from school and she was not looking her best, I would be a little bit embarrassed. I always liked it when she had her hair done and she put makeup. And my mom is a very glamorous woman. It's like a typical Greek woman. Greek women are a little bit always, it's part of the culture. You have to always have to be dressed up, always have your hair and nails done. It's very important. And another pressure of society, and that's how I grew up, that you always have to look your best. I remember my grandmother used to tell me, even when you go, in Greece we have a lot of little kiosks everywhere in the city that they sell candy, cigarettes, water, just essential stuff. It's not shops, they're little kiosks everywhere around the city. And my grandmother used to tell me, even when you go to the kiosk just to buy a pair of, I don't know, something, you have to look your best because you never know who you're going to bump into. And so what? And that's one of the things I loved when I first moved to the UK in London, because you could go out literally in your pajamas and nobody cares. Nobody will look down on you. I love that about London. And sometimes I have to admit, because I live right next door to our school, and my kids' school, now we moved. And sometimes it's just one of those mornings and I go in my pajamas and I think somebody gossiped about it and said, oh, we saw Christina, to another friend, and she took the kids in her pajamas 2 days in a row, because it happened 2 days in a row. Honestly, I don't care. It's like, I don't care. I have no time. I was just rushing. And generally, I love this about this country, that you can just go out naked on the street and nobody would care. But in the school term, somebody, made a comment.
So it's funny because my experience is exactly the opposite. So in my family, my dad was the one who would take a long time to get ready, always look completely done up, never really wore jeans when we were growing up. He was always ready for whatever was happening. And his mother was the one who gave me the same advice as your grandmother, which is, so my grandmother, she said, no matter where you are, always be ready for the unknown.
That's part of the femininity that we were raised.
And she was always, well into her 90s, wearing heels. And
same.
Whereas my mother was very much the opposite. I can count on one hand how many times she dressed up. And I think that she didn't put a lot of stress on that. And so initially I didn't either. And I started to... I grew up in Boston, so it was very similar to London in a lot of ways.
More relaxed, cooler.
But it was more relaxed, but then you would also, when you went somewhere, you knew how to get dressed up. It wasn't relaxed all the time. And when I moved to California, it completely flipped where it was too relaxed all the time. And I remember I had friends who would make fun of that and say, you don't know how to dress in a relaxed way. Even if you're going to an outdoor concert, you're like too dressed up almost. And it's because I had finally learned how to be dressed up and how to behave
you wanted
in that
to
way.
show it.
No, and I didn't know how to do the opposite.
The opposite, okay.
You know? And so I've always struggled with that kind of ebb and flow. Where am I, what am I wearing? Unless it's a very obvious, you're either very much dressed up or you're in sports gear because you're actually doing sports versus you live in sports gear because you don't have the time.
Which now most of us do so. I mean, you
it
dress
went
up for
from
work.
being a choice to wear, your workout clothes as, a signature of cool or whatever, or the I don't care, to now you just literally don't have the time. So when you are in your pajamas or in sports gear or rushing in sweatpants to drop the kids off, or you haven't done your hair and that's why you're wearing a hat for 7 days in a row because half your head is white and the other half is, then it goes from being a choice that you're making consciously to so much overwhelm that you don't have a choice anymore. And the energy is expended on what you actually start to enjoy, which is looking nice and which is dressing up, which is feeling more feminine. So it goes in these weird things, where these weird waves. And I really liked moving here from California because there is more of a balance, because you can dress up and go out to dinner and nobody's going to wonder why you're overdressed. But you can also be casual.
You can never be overdressed.
Exactly. And so I think that balance is the most important thing, not one or the other, because the constantly relaxed look has its own downsides over time. Maybe not here and there, but over time. And it impacts you personally,
psychologically,
and it impacts your discipline. It impacts your self-respect, I think. And I'm not talking about, when we're just relaxed in jeans. I'm talking about when we're basically have let ourselves go. And I think that's where
there's a fine balance.
And for me personally, because I am very much, the balance is the most difficult thing in my life. The most important moments is when somebody can help you get out of that.
But how would you do that? How would you feel, for example, if I came and said, Ani, get your act together?
You have. Not in so many words.
Okay.
But I've come to you complaining about my own loss of myself. And this was around the time of COVID, where when we started COVID, I had finally lost, the baby weight from baby number 2, and I was feeling good. And when we went into COVID, I yo-yoed again. And coming out of that, I remember I kept having this loop of saying, okay, I'm not happy. And you said, so why don't you do something about it? And that started our journey to Pilates. And it wasn't
and we
even
pushed
what
each
you
other
said,
to do so.
It was how you looked at me. Kind of I've heard you say this again and again. And I had a friend who did something similar for me with my career. And I met her when I was living in California, and she travels between California and London a lot. And she said to me, 10 years ago, you were complaining to me about your work. You're still complaining. So when are you going to actually make a change? And I'm somebody who doesn't shy away from problems normally. So those two comments are examples of comments that I get from people who really show me a mirror, that are adults, not my children. And now that my kids have a voice, they do it as well. But I think that, I was watching a clip recently about Trevor Noah was speaking to Simon Sinek, and he said, there's a difference between kindness and being nice. So I could look at you and you have something on your face, and I could be nice and not want to hurt your feelings. And you ask me, how do I look? And I say, fine. Or I could look at you and you ask me, how it is. And maybe it doesn't come out as nice, but I'm actually being kind by telling you the truth. And I think that
it's important.
It's important. It's lacking.
Because that's how we empower each other, and that's how we help each other. Yes, you're right. It has to be done in a way that you don't hurt somebody's feelings or you're not rude to them. But sometimes you need that push. And that comes from true friendships. And that's what we have to do. And I had something similar as well with my baby weight. And funny enough, it came from my brother, who said to me, either, because I put on 25 kilos with each pregnancy, which is way above the limit, the acceptable limit. Even my doctors were saying, okay, you have a problem. With the second one, it took me a long time to lose it as well. And that's how, we got into the Pilates thing. But it was my brother as well who came to me and said, look, either you lose your weight or something is going to happen to your relationship. And he was a bit very rough with me, harsh. And he said, if you don't lose your weight, your husband is going to have an affair and he will be right. And that was a man's point of view. But then, it really pushed me. And I said, well, I looked at myself in the mirror. I said, okay, enough is enough. Not because, of the affair scare, but it was that kick, that kick in my face that I needed. And
So for me, I think you go through these several times. So you can say to yourself, whatever it is that you want, I remember you were giving me tips on how to incentivize myself to get it together. And sometimes, what I've realized is that no matter what people say, unless you're willing to hear that comment in that right moment and really absorb it, like what you said to me, no matter how many scares you get in my you have
to be in the right moment to do it.
People say, oh, well, just go pay for a class and then you'll show up. Nope, not if I don't want to, because even if I have no money in my pocket, if I don't want to make it to that class, even if I know it's good for me, if I don't have that respect for myself, I'm not going to make it. So it's something else. And my sister, this thing that you told me your brother said, my sister told me once that when somebody gives you feedback, if it's harsh, what you have to think about is, what is their intention? So if their intention is that they mean you harm, which clearly is not the case for your brother, or you to me, then you take it with a grain of salt. And not everybody can, though, because that's also a learned skill. Because a lot of people internalized everything that other people say to them until they get to either a point where they break down or they break up and they kind of say, all right, no, your opinion is not necessarily relevant because
but it also matters
it doesn't come with the best. Yes. So when it comes with positive intention, even if it is harsh, I think it's important. I don't know if you see this in business, but I see this in my business as well.
Business is a bit trickier, though, I think.
Really? But I
find it's a bit trickier.
Okay, why?
Because I find with the younger generations, especially, when you say something and it's a constructive criticism, they always take it to heart, to a point of they become defensive, they block out, they don't want to listen. There's always an excuse. Yes, but they don't self-reflect. Where I feel that people our age and even above us, we listen, we sit back and we listen. And for me, from my experience in business, it's a very generational thing. And a lot of people that I'm talking about are telling me the same thing, that they really struggle with the Gen Z. No offense to Gen Z, but it's just a generational thing. And that's why you have a lot of memes on social media joking about it. I think it's that's my personal experience with
mine is not a generational thing. My experience is a habitual thing.
Okay.
And because I work with right now, for example, a lot of people that I work with or work to help me with different elements of my business are younger, and their work ethic is amazing, incredible. Their creativity is incredible. Their work ethic is incredible, but not every single person.
Yeah.
And I think I can cut that across every age group.
Yes.
I've seen bad and
of course.
But I would say that in my experience, if you're sitting around like a boardroom, people are more comfortable in saying yes and head nodding to the loudest or most the firmest person in the room when it comes to the idea, versus picking it apart and critiquing it if it doesn't really make sense.
Okay.
Because there's this need for getting to a conclusion, even if it's not the right conclusion, versus there's a need to openly question and discuss and pick apart and say, maybe that's not really the right idea, because something about what you said is making me think that 3 steps down the line, we might end up in a bad place. And there isn't that push and pull in every environment. And right now, especially with everything that's happening in the tech space, that's the most important thing. There's also discomfort in saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
In every generation, to say, I actually have no, and there's so much power in saying that. You know what? If you hired me to help you with something tomorrow, but I have no idea how your business operates, and there's, if I don't kind of share that with you and get your advice as somebody who has more experience in it, could potentially whatever decisions I make on behalf of your business could lead you to failure, right?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And I tell my kids this, actually. I tell them there's 3 ways of saying, I know, I know, I know.
Yeah,
there's
which
the people, which they all say, yeah, I know, I know, I know. There's the people, the kids who say, or the people, because this is every age group, they say, I know, and they don't know. So they go back and they figure it out, and then they actually do know. There's the people who say, I know, and never bother to learn, because it's an ego thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the people who actually know, who never have to say, I know, because they know enough to tell you that they have no clue, and they're always learning, And so you want to be once you get to that point where you're enjoying the learning process and not knowing, that's a brilliant place to be. But then if you should never say, I know, I know, I know, and then not bother to actually learn.
Yeah.
If you're trying to save face.
And
I think that's so important.
There's one category I think you missed, which is the half no.
Yes.
Because
I know one part, but not the other.
I know one
yes.
part,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think I know.
Yes. I think
Because
I know. But let's talk about it, because maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, you're right. Because it's, you don't, actually, my son asked me, he said, maybe 6 months ago, he said, is work hard? And I loved that question. And I said to him, it's not if you enjoy it.
Yeah.
It could look like physically hard. It could look like you're, in front of a computer for hours and hours. It could look like you're stressed, but you could actually enjoy that because you've enjoyed how to constantly push yourself and learn. And we just had the Olympics, and every person who won any medal that got up on that podium later to talk about their experience talked about how they pushed themselves, how they broke, through this barrier and that barrier. And most of it mental. It wasn't even the physicality of what they were doing. Yeah. It was the mental barriers that either somebody else had set for them or they set for themselves.
And that goes with everybody. Every successful person in the world, whether it's in music or in theater or in business or an athlete, they all have something in common. And when they ask this, when you ask them, how do you do it? They all say it's just really hard work, discipline, but it comes with love for what you do. Because I don't think you can give 100% to something when you don't really love it. And that's, you have to figure out what you really love, and then it just comes naturally.
Yes.
It's very important.
Yes. Yeah. One of those moments was when I was telling you my friend who is part-time in London, part-time in California, when she said to me, you've been complaining about this for over a decade now. I think I've known her at that point for 15 years, and I'd been complaining to her
about
since
your
the
work.
day I met her about how unhappy I was with what I was doing. And she said, so just when are you going to actually change it? And I remember I spoke to my sister about it, and I told her, I'm unhappy with my work, etc. And she said to me, you're bored. You're enjoying working a lot, but you're bored with what you're doing.
With your role at the time.
With my role at the time. And this was, several jobs ago. Yeah. And I remember those 2 comments really stuck with me. And I started to think about, okay, so if I'm comfortable with making a change, my problem was, what do I change to? And if now I've seen that maybe actually I've never thought as me not enjoying my work as me being bored. And now that I'm working exponentially harder than I was when I worked for a corporation, I'm working a lot more.
Yeah.
But I'm not, even if I'm physically tired, even though I might have more of a black under eye, I'm happier working more because I'm enjoying the outcome. I'm enjoying having the right, the priority, the back and forth with
being
my family.
In control.
The control, people, I think I never felt like I wasn't in my jobs on the corporate side. I got lucky that I had some great leaders that I worked for who gave me the
power to do what you wanted.
Yes, and even though it was completely against the grain sometimes, but they were smart enough to see that it just made logical sense, and they let me try it, and as long as I proved to them with a return, they were happy.
Because that's a lot of people what they're struggling with.
Yes.
Because I have a lot of friends that are telling me that even because sometimes when I was complaining about how much I work and oh my God, I have no weekends, I have no days off, I have this, and they were telling me, yeah, Christina, you know, I work in the corporate world and I don't have a weekend either. At least it's for you, but I have my boss texting me, emailing me, I want this, I want that, and so I'm never off either, but at least it's under your terms. So it's very important, and you're lucky that you had that, because that adds a lot to their load as well. That's where it really gets hard.
I had one experience with one micromanager that I worked with, and it broke me. It almost broke me. It broke a lot of people on our team, because I think that comes down to not being trusted.
Yeah.
Not because you don't know. I had also a boss who was really tough, and I remember she said to me one time, right before actually, and these were right next to each other, these two people that I worked for, and I would go to her and I would ask her a question, and one time she just looked at me and she said, you know the answer to this. You go figure it out. Don't come to me and ask me until you've looked at it, 10 different ways. And at first, I remember the moment I was standing next to her desk when she said this to me, and I remember how harsh it felt. But to this day, I'm so thankful for that moment, because she kind of gave me the permission to be accountable, and to drive my own decisions, and to not necessarily wait to follow the leader.
Yes, and lean on them.
Yes, versus the other kind where every word I was saying in a presentation was picked apart, broken, I was told I was wrong, and so you second guess every single thing you do. And I remember I would get into the office sometimes at 5 a.m. to try and learn these things and behaviors that I was expected to have that weren't really clear to me.
Yeah.
It was way too ethereal, and I didn't really have a good idea of what she expected me to do. And that nearly broke me. But then afterwards, I went back to having wonderful people that I worked for that I learned a ton from. And a lot of it was when I needed help, I could go to them and say, I have no idea. What do I do?
Yeah.
Or I'm in trouble, help me figure this out. Or, I don't know how to deal with this situation, etc. And they would be there for that. But the rest of the time, they just gave me a clear goal and total autonomy. And it didn't matter whether I had a team that I worked with, whether I was working alone. It was their kind of trust in me.
And was it
that really helped me?
Was it women or men bosses?
Both.
Okay, interesting.
Both. So I've had great mix of both. The micromanager was a female.
Okay.
But the rest were men. Men and women.
Okay.
Mix. So
Nice.
And their behavior was the same. They were very harsh. They were difficult people to work for because their expectation was a lot. But they were very clear on what their expectation was.
That's very important.
And they were very
give clear direction.
Clear direction and very arm's length.
Yeah.
Like, here's the goal, you go figure it out. And you come to me when you need me. They were also supportive.
But don't just come to me with everything. Don't bring me problems, bring me the solutions.
Or if you bring me a problem, tell me what you've tried to do to find the solution and where you're stuck.
Yeah. That's
don't
what
just
we
come
always
with the problem.
Say because I have a lot of employees they come with a problem. There's always a problem. Every day there's a problem. That's the restaurant business as well. Your job is to solve problems. As a restaurant owner, your job is to solve problems every single day. And what we always say to them is like, don't come to me with a problem. I know that the problem exists.
Yes.
Come to me straight with a solution. And if I think that is not the right solution, as you said, we will figure it out. But come to me with a solution. This is what's happening. This is what I suggest.
Yes. So how do you empower them to make those decisions in the hospitality industry?
How do I? Well, first of all, I say it's very important. Like, I train them in my way of thinking, in a way of how I would
approach the problem.
That's the start when they start working with us, and then gradually I set them free, and then they use their logic, but they're trained on how we deal with it stuff as a company. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Does it make sense?
So you show them the way that you would do it, but don't necessarily force them to do it in the same way. Yeah, I think, but because
they have to follow. Every company has an ethos and a concept, and so they have to be within our guidelines.
Yeah. I think actually this is an interesting thing, because I don't know if you've noticed this, but over the last 20 years, I felt like in the beginning of my career, there was a lot more clarity on what those expectations were, and there was a lot less choice though at the time. Obviously, in the late 90s, early 2000s, things were just bubbling up, especially in my sector, and with the internet and marketing, etc. Things were just starting to bubble up in terms of choice.
Yeah.
Because it used to be very traditional media,
and then suddenly,
and it was set. And so the training was very clear. And then as things exponentially changed and more choices became available, everything got more confusing in terms of you would step into a new job, and it went from, okay, here's your role. Let me help you understand it, no matter what level you were, okay? And then let me set you to do it your own way. And so that clarity kind of disappeared, and it became more, let me just throw you into the deep end.
And that's the biggest
see if
problem.
You sink or swim.
Exactly. You have to give guidelines and then let them, whatever you do in life, with your children, with your employees, you have to give the guideline and say, this is how we roll. This is how we do things here. This is the expectations. This is your role. And then you do it. But what you said is the biggest mistakes, and we have done this mistake. We have made this mistake in the past, where we were extremely busy. I was simultaneously opening 3 restaurants at the same time, 1 in London, 2 abroad, in different continents, and new people. It was also a transitional period after COVID, where there was a lot of new staff and new members of the team, and I didn't have time. So I was employing people because they were managers before in other restaurants, and just expecting them to understand. And then they would come and do what they've learned in other restaurants, but other restaurants were completely different to ours. And it just, at the end, it just exploded. And then I said, okay, we're going back to basics. So whoever I hire from now on, there's going to be a very clear direction and a very clear understanding. They need to understand what I want from, and then they flourished. But unless you do that, and then you can't succeed. And it's also unfair for them, because you expect things from them without telling them what you expect. And then you get upset because they're not delivering.
But they have no idea.
So you are the problem, not them.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think that you said something there also that is difficult. And it was when we were talking about the I don't know, the ability to say I don't know. Also the responsibility when you fail at something. So when you do something wrong, okay, or you do something and you realize, this doesn't work, which we all do. So this whole concept of being
at work,
every single
personal
day,
life,
every single day. That's the whole point of learning and growing, is you don't know until you know. So, but what you said on the business side is that very few businesses, especially right now, are comfortable in saying, oh, we messed that up. We messed that up, and here's how we fixed it, so that we don't make that mistake again. That's how you learn.
You always learn from your mistakes.
But the best examples, especially to a company where you have employees, is where you are very transparent about this. We've done this way, and it was the wrong way to do it, especially in that moment as it happens.
So how do we have
fix
to
it? Yes,
change
now we're
direction.
changing it, and we are clear that this didn't work, and we're clear why it failed. We're clear why it was not the right way to work. So here's how we're altering course.
Absolutely.
And we can only do that when we work together. Not when we dictate what you should do. And or you bring in one form of behavior and you're unable to change. So I think that is such a strength.
And being able to change.
Being able to change.
That's the, don't be stubborn. Say, okay, we tried it didn't work. Why did it not work? This is where the solution is. Is the why it failed. That's your solution.
Exactly.
And I
Yeah,
think-
and if that fails too, then there's another
solution.
So
Exactly.
this comfort of being flexible and
keep
trying
trying,
different.
keep falling, and keep getting up, and keep going, and just trying to figure it out. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. You will make mistakes, and you will only learn from your mistakes. It's such a cliche. Everybody's saying it, but it's so true, because I only learned from my mistakes. And boy, I've made a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and I went to university, and everything I learned was just a theory.
Yes.
But the biggest mistake I made, I remember, it was a few years ago, and it was a very bad business decision, and I lost a lot of money, and it cost me a lot in psychological stress and a lot of things. And one of my best friends at the time said to me, Christina, don't look at it like that. Just everything you experienced, you paid for a very good MBA, and it would have cost you to the top university in the US, double the price, and you wouldn't have learned anything that
because
you
it's
learned.
theoretical.
So don't think about the money you lost. On the contrary, that's your MBA
experience gained. Yeah.
And I always remember what he said, and it's so true, so true.
There's a clip of this. I think he's an NBA player, and he's doing like this after game, interview with all the reporters in the room, and it's going around all over Instagram. And he said, the reporter asks him, "So do you see this as a failure?" And the player gets visibly frustrated because he points out that this question has been asked to him by the same journalist before, and he says, "Do you think that every time Michael Jordan lost, he was failing?
Yeah.
Do you get promoted year after year? No, you keep trying, you keep going. So it's not experience." And just last week, or maybe just this past week, Eileen Gu also was asked something similar about her medals. She was asked by a reporter if her silver medals basically were failure against the gold that she could have won. And she looked at them and said, "What a ludicrous question this is," and she was very eloquent in how she answered it. But I think that all those stories apply, and I know that they're jarring things that get you a lot of clicks and lots of readership in your paper, but they're not necessarily the right way to look at behaviors.
And I think that's where it all comes to, actually, in our personal lives, in our careers, in our experience of motherhood. We keep failing, we keep trying, we learn from our mistakes, and we just keep moving forward.
Exactly.
And I think that's what it is.
Agreed. Cheers.
Cheers to that. And to good friends.
Yes.
To figure it out together.